We start here. Infrastructure recovery, industrial development, tourism growth and prioritizing agriculture are some of the priority areas that Nomusa Dube-Ncube is faced with in her first 100 days in office. The Premier of KZN was speaking at the just-ended Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation's Inclusive Growth Forum. Newzroom Afrika's Hugo Ribatika joins us now live from Drakensberg. Hugo, great, insightful conversations over the last 3 days. What's been the contribution of the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal?
Hello, Clement, you're absolutely right. Well, she's obviously welcomed us to her province on the back end of the convention. And some of the things that she talked about are her priority areas, certainly not quite yet 100 days in office, but, you know, I think her baptism, if you will, has been one of fire, so much to deal with. So she joins us now just to outline some of the areas that she's got to work with, and obviously the work that she's got to do in convincing many corporates to stay within the KZN region. Premier, very good afternoon. Thank you so much for speaking to us and appreciate the welcome to your province. Now, in your talk a few minutes ago, you talked about Toyota and how they lost 70,000 vehicles in those floods. Obviously, not every corporate wants to stay in an area that is flood prone. What sort of work have you had to do or interventions to get corporates such as Toyota to stay within KZN?
Well, thank you very much for having us. We've had to deal with a number of discussions with various companies, as you say, and corporates. We are very grateful to companies such as Toyota, Yomondi, and many other companies in what we call the South Industrial Basin, because they've really said without uncertain time that they don't want to move. That was their first call to us. Although we do have what we call the South Automotive Park that we are presently building, which will be our hub really for the automotive in KwaZulu-Natal. Toyota chose to stay where they are, and what we've had to do is that working with them, they brought even people from Japan to come and help us to design plans so that we ensure that what happened there with some of our tunnels that are supposed to take water, not being able to take the amount of water that was there at the time. Obviously, there were a number of factors that contributed to that kind of a situation there. One of the things is that that particular area is waterlogged, but it's also an area that is underwater in any event. So we've had to look at plans as to how then do we cushion so that, again, those companies can be insurable and they are able as well to keep up with the expansion. Companies such as Toyota, they employ more than 8,000 people in that site alone, and that is why we couldn't afford to lose them. But we've had to look at other industrial areas, but also our infrastructure generally, that we've had to look at the roads, the rail as well, our ports, the efficiency of the ports, because as you know, ports are still the backbone of our economy, as a lot of goods travel from the port inland in our country. So without the efficiency and the effectiveness, but also the safety of our ports, we cannot be guaranteed that many people will use our port as opposed to other ports in the African continent.
And Premier, let's talk a little bit about the people of KZN, the people that remain homeless to this day. One of the challenges that you've faced in relocation is that you've gone into neighborhoods where those residents are not welcoming.
Indeed, I say all the time that one of the disasters of untold proportion has been the loss in the human lives. but also the destruction in the family fiber of many families that had to go and live in the shelters, in the mass shelters, which are not good conditions for families, for kids, not conducive for anybody to live there. And you are quite correct. We've had to look at all the land parcels that are available, land parcels that belong to government first, before we can even explore the private land. And many of the land parcels that we have, as you know, at eThekwini, we don't have as much as in outside of eThekwini, but the many that we have, we've had communities of those areas saying, not in my backyard, you're not going to build a low-cost kind of houses here. Even if we had good designs, because what we needed to build temporary houses, which is proper houses, while we're still making plans for proper permanent houses for those people. And even when we were looking at now starting to build the real house, we've had to convince those people with the plans and everything that no, those houses are actually, some of them are even expensive more than their properties. But it's been very difficult to get people to understand that, here you are, you've got communities that have been living in this particular area. Some of them, one of the residents say he knows one of the family that have been living there for more than 30 years. And they work in the area. But when it comes to now being sympathetic to their plight, other people are like, no, they must go elsewhere. And unfortunately, the problem of private sector, some of them exploiting government by charging more than what normally they will charge to rent some of the temporary residential flats that we've had now to move to. We chose to now move to what we call temporary residential flats as opposed to building temporary residential houses, because the flats, at least they can take more people than to build individual, houses.
Well, Premier,
that's why we're now
Premier, why
moving.
are you there? What are those numbers looking like of those that remain in the temporary accommodation that you provided versus those that you've been able to release into various other permanent structures?
Well, we've built more than 1,900 temporary residential houses, but we still have about 2,000 families, that are still remaining. Right now, we've been able, just within a month, we've been able to close about 10 shelters because we've rented now those flats where we're just putting everybody up in the flats so that we don't have to start, planning and having designs and having all those things. What we're now looking at is their permanent houses, while at least they're living in conditions that are safe and conditions that are, conducive for families to live and the kids to live in those, flats that we've now had to obtain.
Now, finally, Premier, some of the numbers that always seem to slip under the radar are certainly for small businesses and those individuals that are running their own little sort of home industries, if you will. Many of those don't have insurance, so weren't able to claim. What is the state with the SMMEs, and how are you looking to support those that didn't have the necessary resources to bounce back?
Yes, the SMMEs were the hardest hit, as I say, because most of them do not have insurance because they can't afford. They just can't afford to have insurance. But also sometimes the areas where they have their businesses, insurances will say, no, they are high risk. So that makes it even more unaffordable for them to have insurance. We've had to set aside about 300 million as government to try and help them rebuild and reconstruct their businesses. But others, we've had to help them to repurpose their businesses, so that because there has also been movement of people, people who might have been, your clients might have moved from that area because of these floods. Now, what else do you do? What else do you have as a business? So we had to repurpose some of the businesses, but also as the province, as we're moving towards a smart province, smart connected province, we're getting more and more people to really focus and look at the digital economy, because we do believe that that's got massive opportunities for SMMEs, but also for young people. We've seen it in many areas where we've been able to connect communities, but also where we've started getting young people to be trained as data scientists, data analysts. Others we're training to do robotics, various other things in the digital economy. You'll find that in one side where you're connecting people, you can have about 10,000 other SMMEs jobs there, because now you need people who are going to be able to put up those towers. You need people who are going to be connecting people. You need people who are going to sell data. You need people who are going to fix gadgets. People who are going to fix this network when it's not working. So there's a number of opportunities that get open. And we've added now that because our province is a rural province, let's look also at the smart agriculture. We launched it on Saturday, where we're bringing in rural people to say, look, you can actually use drones to have a better yields from your crops, such that if you need to, to look at your crops, whether there are insects that you need, to deal with, you can use the drone to actually fly the drone, have it to spray those insects, but also you could be able to do more business without having to go to the fields if you're using the drone. But at the same time, we're introducing young people to be trained as drone pilots, because many of our young people without matric at least can get as drone pilots, because they don't need matric if they are to be drone pilots. But even beyond being drone pilots, we're looking at others then creating SMME businesses with our youth fund, so that they can also be training of the trainers and training other young people to get into the digital economy. I've been saying that as KZN, we are the minefield for a lot of companies in the world that are laying their undersea cable, and yet we are 11% connected. The penetration of connectivity is only 11%. And yet, the cables that are laid in our province, in our shores, connect to the rest of the world. Almost all the continents are connected from KZN, and yet we are not connected. And we're not even yielding anything for the benefits of communities who are letting, those minerals and those undersea minerals to the rest of the world. And those are some of the things we're beginning to say, look, it is unfair that we're not benefiting from this massive industry, because it's trillions of dollars, this industry, and there's not even a cent that gets to the communities, be they training for SMME, be they partnership with the SMMEs. And those are some of the things as a smart province we're going to be looking at.
Premier Nomusa Dube-Ncube, appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Clement, that was the Premier speaking to us, just giving us a narrative on the amount of work that she's having to do. And as you would be aware, the SMME sector is one of those sectors that was hit extremely hard by the floods in KZN. Clement.
Thank you, Hugo.